Donald Trump announced 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods, excluding oil and gas, which will be determined later. However, perhaps he forgot Canada could strike back in a way that could send shockwaves to the American economy. He also forgot, or refused to accept, that the United States was deeply dependent on some Canadian commodities, like oil, gas, and electricity. Canada exports 97% of its oil, which becomes 65% of the total U.S. oil imports. Furthermore, Canada also supplied electricity to over 1 million homes in the United States, and any disturbance in this could lead to serious losses. And that's where Canada decided to hit to hurt the United States most. Ontario decided to impose 25% tariffs on electricity, in addition to 25% tariffs imposed on $30 billion. In total, a $155 billion tariff package was announced. However, Trump didn't back down and announced he could double the tariffs to 50%. This has escalated the trade war, resulting in abrupt retaliatory tariffs that are hitting both countries' economies hard. However, in a recent move, Canada has stopped U.S. exports from either entering the Canadian borders or rejecting them even after they entered Canada. But how is that happening, and how can they hit the U.S. where it hurts the most? In this video, let's know about the whole story. The United States and Donald Trump never thought this could happen. American products are being halted at Canadian borders, and those allowed to enter Canada are silently being sidelined. This is being done to downplay how Canada is responding because a direct ban on American products would take the trade war to another level. It would be something even harsher, which even Trump did not do. And all this points toward one direction. Canada has decided not only to take a stand, but to make an example out of the United States. However, this crisis was entirely avoidable. But Trump's blunt force economic policies left Canada with no choice but to hit back and hit hard. The trouble started when Trump imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum, thinking it would force Canada to negotiate under his terms. But what truly ignited national outrage wasn't just the tariffs. It was Trump's open insults, repeatedly mocking Canada's sovereignty and even suggesting that Canada should become the 51st U.S. state. For Canadians, this wasn't just about trade. It was about national pride. And the response was swift, widespread, and devastating for American businesses. The United States is facing one of its worst trade crises in recent history, and Canada is leading the charge. In response to Donald Trump's reckless tariff policies and repeated attacks on Canada's sovereignty, the Canadian economy is shifting away from U.S. goods, creating a devastating impact on multiple American industries. One of the most immediate and severe economic blows has come from Canadian grocery retailers, where American food products are being phased out at an unprecedented rate. Michael Medline, CEO of Empire Company Limited, which owns some of Canada's largest supermarket chains, confirmed that U.S. food sales are plummeting across Canada. According to Medline, American products that once made up a significant portion of Canadian grocery sales are now being removed from shelves as consumers actively reject U.S. goods. The shift is not just temporary. It is permanent and transformational. Canadian grocery stores are prioritizing domestic and international suppliers, effectively reducing their reliance on American imports. In recent months, sales of U.S. goods at Canadian grocery stores have declined rapidly as Canadians brace for the impact of Trump's sweeping tariffs. With food prices already expected to skyrocket due to trade disputes, many Canadians are taking proactive steps to shift their buying habits. Grocery chains have noticed the shift and are now promoting Canadian products more than ever before. Medline explained that his company had already spent years diversifying its supply chain to avoid over-reliance on any single country, particularly the United States. Now, that effort is paying off as Canada moves away from American imports. This is especially devastating for U.S. food exporters, particularly in dairy, meat, produce, and packaged goods. Dairy and meat suppliers in the U.S. are seeing orders dry up as Canada turns to domestic and European alternatives. The winter reliance on American fruits and vegetables is becoming a major concern for U.S. farmers, as Canadian grocers are aggressively seeking alternative suppliers. Packaged food brands that once dominated the Canadian market are rapidly losing ground, with many American companies seeing their revenue streams cut off overnight. Empire company La Moitié and other major retailers have stated that their sourcing strategies will permanently change, meaning American food brands are unlikely to regain their former dominance in Canada. This is not just a short-term reaction to Trump's tariffs. It is a long-term rejection of U.S. economic influence. But things don't stop here. Perhaps the most symbolic and financially destructive move has been Canada's outright ban on U.S. alcohol imports. Across multiple provinces, the decision to ban American beer, wine, and spirits has sent shockwaves through the U.S. liquor industry. In British Columbia, Premier David Eby announced that all American alcohol had been removed from the province's 198 government-run liquor stores. The ban was framed as both an economic and political response to Trump's ongoing trade war and his repeated insults directed at Canada. Ontario, the country's most populous province, has followed suit, cutting off U.S. liquor imports entirely, which has effectively wiped out a billion-dollar market for American spirit makers such as Jack Daniel's and Jim Beam. The devastation for U.S. alcohol producers is immediate and severe. For decades, American liquor brands have dominated the Canadian market, generating billions in revenue. Now, those sales have vanished overnight. Industry executives are panicking, with Lawson Whiting, CEO of Brown-Forman, the parent company of Jack Daniel's, admitting that this move is even worse than tariffs. The consumer response in Canada has been overwhelmingly supportive of the liquor ban. Canadians are embracing local and international alternatives, and industry experts predict that U.S. brands may never recover their lost market share. What began as a retaliation against tariffs has now turned into a permanent shift in consumer habits, which will cost American liquor companies billions of dollars in lost revenue over time. Furthermore, American pork producers are now in full crisis mode, thanks to Canada's decision to suspend pork imports from the largest U.S. processor, Smithfield Foods. This move has immediately cut off $850 million in exports, leaving thousands of U.S. pig farmers with nowhere to send their meat. For decades, Canada has been one of the biggest buyers of U.S. pork, but that reliance is now over. The sudden import suspension means that U.S. pork prices are collapsing as supply outweighs demand. The result is that now, American pig farmers are facing the possibility of bankruptcy. Smithfield Foods, the largest pork processor in the U.S., has already stated that it is working with the USDA to resolve the situation, but the damage has already been done. American farmers who depended on Canada as a major export destination are now left stranded with no buyers. The pork industry is now in turmoil, as thousands of farmers face the possibility of shutting down their operations due to a market that has turned against them. What's more, the U.S. auto industry has become one of the biggest victims of Trump's failed trade war, as Canadian tariffs on U.S. steel and aluminum have sent production costs soaring. The entire North American auto industry is now in jeopardy, with American automakers struggling to absorb tariff-driven price hikes that make their vehicles less competitive and more expensive. The Ford F-150, America's best-selling truck, now costs hundreds more per unit due to the increased price of steel and aluminum. Automakers across the U.S. are discussing layoffs, as the financial burden of these tariffs threatens their long-term stability. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. For years, the U.S. and Canada maintained a deeply integrated auto industry, where vehicles and parts crossed the border multiple times before final assembly. But now, Canada is aggressively shifting away from U.S. suppliers, seeking alternatives in Europe, Asia, and even domestic production. As a result, American auto companies are losing a vital market, and the ripple effect could be catastrophic for the industry as a whole. With production costs rising, sales dropping, and Canada no longer dependent on U.S. auto parts, the American car industry is on the verge of collapse. Interestingly, Trump's reckless economic policies have not only devastated American industries, but are now directly harming everyday Americans. From rising grocery prices to vanishing Canadian tourism, the consequences of this failed trade war are being felt in households across the United States. The irony is unavoidable. Trump's America First agenda has turned into an America Last disaster, with businesses collapsing, workers losing their jobs, and Wall Street descending into turmoil, losing $5 trillion in just 3 weeks. While Canada stands firm and strengthens its economy, the U.S. is spiraling into an economic crisis of its own making. For millions of Americans, the most painful consequence of Trump's trade war with Canada is the rising cost of everyday goods. What started as an economic dispute between governments has now translated into higher grocery prices, more expensive cars, and overall inflation that is making life harder for working-class Americans. Grocery stores across the U.S. are seeing sharp price increases on everything from meat and dairy to fruits and vegetables. This is a direct result of Canada phasing out American imports, forcing U.S. suppliers to scramble for alternative buyers. With a sudden oversupply in the domestic market, food producers are cutting costs, shutting down operations, or passing losses on to consumers. U.S. agriculture, which once thrived on Canadian exports, is now collapsing under the weight of Trump's failed policies. The loss of the $850 million pork export market to Canada alone has sent ripples through the farming industry, leaving pig farmers struggling to survive. Dairy producers are facing a similar crisis, as Canada turns to European and domestic alternatives, shutting out American suppliers. The cancellation of major export deals has forced many farmers into bankruptcy, as prices drop below sustainable levels. Meanwhile, the cost of buying an American-made vehicle has skyrocketed. With Canadian tariffs on U.S. steel and aluminum, automakers are paying more for raw materials, and those increased costs are being passed directly to consumers. The Ford F-150, America's most popular truck, has seen its sticker price rise by hundreds of dollars per unit, making it less affordable for working-class families. Other automakers are considering layoffs, as they struggle to remain competitive in a market where production costs are rising, but consumer demand is shrinking. For everyday Americans, the reality is setting in. Trump's policies have made life more expensive, not better. The cost of living is rising, and wages aren't keeping up. The working class is being squeezed harder than ever, all while the White House continues to downplay the economic devastation that is unfolding across the country. Another major economic blow to the U.S. is the disappearance of Canadian tourists, who once poured billions of dollars into the American economy every year. Now, they are staying home and taking their spending power with them. Official data shows that Canadian visits to the U.S. have plummeted by 23%, meaning fewer hotel stays, fewer restaurant visits, and fewer retail purchases. The economic loss is staggering. The U.S. tourism industry is losing billions of dollars as a direct result of Trump's hostile trade policies. Air Canada, the country's largest airline, has canceled multiple flights to U.S. tourist destinations, including popular spots like Florida, Arizona, and Nevada. This move is not just a symbolic protest. It is a calculated response to Trump's aggressive tariffs and annexation threats against Canada. If American leadership treats Canada like an enemy, then Canadian businesses will treat the U.S. economy the same way. Beyond airline cancellations, Canadians are actively boycotting American travel destinations. Reports from New Jersey's Wildwoods beach tourism industry confirm that Canadian cancellations are surging, with many travelers explicitly citing Trump's economic policies as their reason for staying away. For decades, Canadians have been some of America's most reliable tourists, spending billions annually in cities across the U.S. Now, with national pride at an all-time high, Canadians are choosing to vacation elsewhere, whether that means traveling within their own country or redirecting their spending to Europe, the Caribbean, and Asia. The loss of Canadian tourism will not be easily reversed. With alternative travel habits forming and Canada strengthening its own domestic tourism industry, the US will struggle for years to regain the economic benefits it once enjoyed from Canadian travelers. All this is creating a storm for America. While Trump continues to boast about his economic policies, the reality in financial markets tells a different story. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and S&P 500 have taken massive hits as investors flee from the uncertainty created by Trump's trade war. Stock markets do not respond well to chaos, and Trump's erratic tariff policies have turned the global economy into a minefield of uncertainty. Investors have lost confidence, businesses are freezing expansion plans, and the stock market is bleeding trillions in days. For American businesses, this instability is disastrous. Companies that rely on international trade are being forced to rethink their supply chains, and many are cutting back on expansion rather than risk further financial losses. The auto industry, manufacturing sector, and agricultural businesses are all in crisis, and Wall Street knows it. Behind closed doors, executives are panicking. The fear is that if this trade war continues, the U.S. economy could slip into a prolonged recession, driven by rising costs, shrinking global demand, and investor withdrawals. Even former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers has warned that Trump's tariff war is the worst trade policy yet, predicting that it could push the U.S. into a deep economic downturn. The White House, however, remains in denial. Trump continues to insist that his trade war is strengthening America, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. But everyone knows the reality. Donald Trump thought he could bully Canada into submission. Instead, he united an entire nation against him, and now it's American businesses that are paying the price. Canadian grocery stores are ditching U.S. products. Canadian liquor stores are banning American alcohol. Canadian consumers are actively boycotting American brands. And while Canada's economy remains resilient, the U.S. economy is collapsing under the weight of its own reckless policies. Farms are going bankrupt. Businesses are losing billions. Wall Street is spiraling into chaos. Trump's America First policy has backfired spectacularly. Instead of making the U.S. stronger, he has made it weaker, and Canada has emerged as the clear winner in this trade battle. Canada didn't start this war, but it is refusing to back down, and at this rate, America may not be able to survive it. What do you think? Can American companies survive when Canadian demand for their products vanishes? What, in your opinion, Canada should do to ensure Trump has no other option than to do a trade deal, removing all tariffs? In the comment section right below, share your thoughts on whether the American economy is so powerful to absorb the impacts of tariffs from all around the world, given that its stock market lost $5 trillion due to tariffs. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.